My name is David Greenstein, and what I'm going to talk to you about is the Innocense project. And I hope I can get my pictures up here. Is there anybody here who has not heard of the Innocense project? Okay, the rest of you have, and the ones that haven't, you're going to find out what it is. It's a very interesting thing. I come from the United States, and we have a really great legal system there, a criminal justice system. It's not perfect, though. There are times when things fall through the cracks. It's an adversarial system. That means that you've got two sides fighting each other. Each is trying to win. That's the point. There's a lot of rules that you have to go by. You have to know your strategy and everything like that. You have to come up with a good personality. You have to have your witnesses present themselves properly. None of this really weighs a lot on guilt or innocence, but this is how the system is. Remember, this is the same system that freed O.J. and convicted Reuben Hurricane Carter. Okay? Now, what happens when things fall through the cracks? What happens when innocent people end up in prison? And it does happen all too often. Well, that's when the Innocense Project takes over. Now, the Innocense Project is not a government agency. It has nothing to do with any federal, state, or local government. It is strictly on its own. It goes by donations and volunteers. Now, in order to understand the Innocense Project and what it does, you've got to first have a pretty broad brush picture of how the system works before the Innocense Project comes in. And so let me give you an idea of how it works. Who are our players? It starts first with the officer on the street, a man or a woman. They make a decision if they're going to arrest. That's pretty simple. Have they seen a crime committed? And do they have reasonable grounds to believe that the suspect committed it? Now, if they haven't, what they'll do is take a report if there's been a crime committed. Either way, something is going to happen there. Let's say that they arrest somebody on the spot. The first thing that has to be done is that person is given their Miranda rights. Now, we all know this. Anybody who sees TV knows it. You have the right to remain silent, yada, yada, yada. Well, there's been one little addition to that. Now, it is not sufficient just to give them their rights, but they can affirmatively, they must affirmatively say, I invoke my right. I don't want to talk. I want to see my attorney. I'm not going to say anything. I want my parents. Unless they affirmatively show that they want to invoke their right of silence, the officers can continue to question them. Okay, so let's say that they're arrested. They're taken down to the station house. Then a supervisor looks over the arrest report. Supervisor has to determine two things. One, under the facts that are written down here, has a crime been committed? Two, does it look like this person did it? If it's affirmative on both of those, then it gets passed on. It gets passed on to the detectives. Now, detectives, they do carry guns, they do go out in the streets, but they do a lot of paperwork and they do a lot of investigation. They're the ones that will talk to the suspect that is now being brought in. Now let me tell you something. One of the things you might not know is this. Detectives are allowed to lie to the suspect. Absolutely. They can say, we've got your fingerprints, we've got your DNA, we've got eyewitnesses. They're allowed to do that. Now, they can also investigate other witnesses to this. They can investigate the evidence, whatever it takes, to find out, do they think there was a crime committed and this suspect committed the crime? Remember, it's still a suspect, not a defendant. If the detectives believe this, then they pass it on to a DDA, a Deputy District Attorney. Now, that Deputy District Attorney goes over every bit of evidence that's been passed on. Now, up until now, there's been two criteria. Oh, that looks nice. I'm glad I don't have anything I want private. Okay. The deputy district attorney has an additional criteria. Of course, has a crime been committed by the facts? Does it look like our suspect did it? Third criteria. This is the first time we brought this one in. Do I think I can get a conviction? The realistic, practical matter. They don't have a lot of money. They don't have a lot of open courtrooms. So the DDA looks at it and says, do I think I can get a conviction? If they think they can get a conviction, then they're going to file it. Then they're going to turn our suspect into a defendant. And you know, this is one of the reasons a lot of times that rape cases are not filed, because it turns into a he said, she said. And when that happens, the DDA shakes his head and says, I don't think I'll get a conviction. A lot of times what they will do, however, they will file. If they're pretty sure the guy did it, they'll file and hope that a plea bargain can be made, that the guy is guilty and he'll make a deal. But that doesn't happen that often. It's just a matter of numbers. Okay, the DDA decides he's going to file it. That's cool. Files it. Now we have a defendant. What happens next? The defendant gets arraigned. That's a simple one. Taken in front of a judge, real quick if he's in custody. Do you plead guilty or not guilty? Plead guilty means he probably made a deal already. Get probation or whatever it might be. Not guilty, that speaks for itself. If he won't say anything, the judge enters a plea of not guilty, consistent with the idea you're innocent until proven guilty. Okay, now, he has the right to an attorney. Usually they get appointed a public defender if they can't afford it, but sometimes the judge knows the public defenders are overworked and underfunded. And I've seen this. I've seen the judge sit there and look out in the courtroom. It's criminal arraignment time. And, oh, Attorney Martin, how are you today? He knows Attorney Martin is a good criminal defense attorney. Martin knows what's happening. Fine, Your Honor. You see our defendant, Mr. Jones? He needs an attorney, and I think you're a great attorney and you're going to be able to help him. Would you talk to him in the lockup after? Right, he's been volunteered. And that's what happens. Now, he does get paid, but he doesn't get anywhere near what he's getting in private practice. Okay, arraignments, they're quick and easy. He probably doesn't spend 3 minutes in front of the judge. The next step that we go through is a preliminary hearing. Now, remember, up until this point, and through an entire process, the prosecution is being challenged at every stage of the proceedings to make sure that that presumption of innocence holds. Now, the preliminary hearing is a little different. First of all, before the preliminary hearing comes about, the prosecution must turn over to the defense every single bit of evidence that they have. Now, this doesn't mean just the evidence that is in their favor. It means every single piece of paper, every single piece of physical evidence has to be turned over. In other words, if the prosecution got an expert and the expert says, yeah, it looks like the guy, I'm not 100% sure, but it looks like it. Well, they want a little more security there, so they get a second expert, and the other expert says, yes, that's him. They have to turn over both reports. If they don't turn over both reports, it is prosecutorial misconduct, and that'll get them knocked out real quick. Okay. Oh! Can we fast forward? Can we? This is my wife. I'd like to introduce her, Jacqueline. She's also my research associate. All right. Cool.
More?
Take a bow. Take a bow.
More?
No, that's fine. I'll fake it from here. I'll fake it from here.
Does your clicker work?
Oh, give me 10 seconds. I'm afraid to even touch the thing. Not going to mess with it. Anyway, we've got our preliminary hearing. At the preliminary hearing, there's only 2 things that the judge determines. Now, this is a real live judge. It's not a hearing officer. The 2 things that are to be determined. 1, has the prosecution convinced me there's been a crime committed? Yeah. 2, does it look like our suspect did it? Yes. If those two criteria are met, the judge at the preliminary hearing binds it over for trial. Now, at that hearing, the defendant has a chance to cross-examine the witnesses. The defendant and his attorney have a chance to look at all the evidence. They can even get up and testify, but there's really no purpose in it because once those two criteria are met, it gets tossed over to the next. And the next is motions. We don't go right to a trial. You've got a motion to exclude evidence, to quash a search warrant, to dismiss the charges, gag order. We're not going to try it in the newspaper. Every kind of motion you can think of. A motion to change a venue. I can't get a fair hearing here. Finally, those get finished. All of that. Now, I'm not going to tell you what the TV is. You watch TV. I'm going to tell you what the trial isn't. First of all, half or more of the stuff you see on television would never happen. You know, you ever see this one? You've got a guy on the stand, he's the witness, and you've got the one attorney talking to him, cross-examining him, and you've got another attorney. The attorney examining him is giving, isn't it true, and isn't it this, and like that. Okay, you see it. Now, the other attorney, objection, objection, Your Honor, objection. Then you get a shot of the judge. He's in la-la land. You know, no. In real life, first of all, the minute an attorney who is saying anything hears the word objection, they stop. They stop dead in their tracks because that other attorney has the right to submit his objection, to state the objection to the court. That's number one. Number two, no judge is going to let the theatrics go on that you see on television. No way. They control the court, and no attorney other than on television will do that. And the guy in the audience, the one that jumps up and says, Your Honor, I can't let this go on. I've got to tell you what's happening. No. If that happens, the judge cuts him off immediately and says, Sir, you sit down. You do not say another word until you've spoken with an attorney. In other words, the judge is not going to let that person incriminate themselves. Again, it goes along with the presumption of innocence. We do get the trial, and if you've ever watched, I think nowadays they have real-time trials. They're really sort of boring if you look at them. It goes on and drones and drones. I probably think the most interesting one might have been the O.J. case. In any case, wait a minute. Have we convicted the guy? Okay. He has been convicted. But you know something? It is not over yet. We have sentencing. And before you do the sentencing, now that's sentencing, by the way, and we're not talking about bad checks or something. We're talking about spending decades in prison, or life in prison, or the death penalty. What they get now is a pre-sentencing hearing. Now what that pre-sentencing hearing does, it allows the defendant, now the convict, he's been convicted, it allows him to get up and talk to the judge. Why should I not get such a hard sentence? I had a bad childhood. I had brain damage from drugs, whatever it might be. Mitigation. It is not a retrial. The defendant is not going to get up there and say, or shouldn't, Your Honor, I shouldn't have been convicted. I didn't do it. This guy got up and said such and it was a lot. That's not the way it goes. The judge is going to make the decision. Now, in some jurisdictions, the jury can recommend a sentence. In some of them, the jury gets to vote between life imprisonment or or the death penalty. And one aside here, it has been shown time after time after time that life imprisonment without possibility of parole is much, much, much less expensive than the death penalty. Dollars and cents. That's not taking a position. That is just a mathematical fact. All right. Now, that's it. He gets sentenced. Anybody recognize the lower left-hand picture? Anybody? He wrote a book. Cell 2455, death row. No? I guess I'm the oldest one here. Okay. The Red Light Bandit. Carol Chessman. Carol Chessman, 12 years on death row. On the right, Norman Parker Jr. Now, you never heard of him. I never heard of him before I did the research here. He has been, and still is, on death row in Florida since 1971. Since 1971. And why? Hit it. I think it's time. It's all over. No place to go. You know what's happened? You've had appeals. You've had years and years and years worth of appeals. They've all been rejected. Every appeal has been rejected. The system has closed down. Now is when the Innocense Project comes in, after every road has been closed. And it's really an uphill battle, because once you're convicted, you are now guilty until your innocence is proven. Now we get into the Innocense Project. Peter Neufeld and Barry Schenck, Yeshiva University, New York, 1992, Cardozo School of Law. Do either of these guys look familiar?
O.J.'s trial.
Again.
From O.J.'s trial.
You got it. O.J.'s Dream Team. That's right. They were on it. These two guys really are very much against the death penalty. They started the Innocense Project almost 20 years ago. It has now spread throughout the United States and in most of the free world. In fact, where I live in Mexico, and 3 weeks ago I read about an Innocense Project case in Mexico where the guy was in fact released. Barry is very knowledgeable in DNA. Very. He can do a mean cross-examination on a DNA expert on the stand. And here's the guy that started the DNA thing and finished it. Well, there were others, but he was the main one. Sir Alec Jeffreys, he's a geneticist. And what happened was, he was studying this stuff for years, and in 1985, he finally came up with what is called a DNA fingerprint. And anybody here not know what DNA matching is? I think we all do. Okay. And by the way, in I think 1995, somewhere around there, he was knighted for his groundbreaking research in that. That's how he got the Sir. How accurate is DNA? First, you've got to have a sample from the crime scene, obviously. Second, you have to do proper collection from the suspect. And if you can't get it, you get a court order for it. And there can't be any break in the chain of custody. In other words, you cannot have, it was signed in here, and the next thing, well, we don't know where it was, but all of a sudden now it's over here. No. You've got all of this, there's your accuracy rate when it's all done right. 99.9999%. That's what happens. Paperwork. That's close enough for government work. How do they get their cases? Of course, they get them from convicts who write in, I'm innocent. But they've got to submit a lot of paperwork to establish that there is a viable reason why they were, shouldn't have been convicted. They get referrals from attorneys, sometimes even district attorneys and even judges. And I'll tell you why that is. Sometimes a judge will look at a case and say, I don't think that was right. I don't think it was right. My gut tells me that. And the judge will refer it to the Innocense Project. Sometimes deputy public defenders will do it. I saw one instance where a deputy public defender didn't have the money, couldn't get a requisition to go out and fly across country to interview a potential alibi witness. And the supervisor said, do it on the phone. So he did it on the phone, but he didn't get a chance to see the guy's demeanor, hear the tone of voice, see what he, how he handled himself. And he, the guy was convicted, his client was convicted, but he doesn't feel right about it. I told you they have to submit all of the paperwork, and we are talking reams and reams and reams of paperwork. We're talking hundreds, thousands. You get a case like OJ, tens of thousands of pages of transcript. Everything from the first FI card, the field identification or field information card that the officer wrote, right up through the transcript, every bit of evidence. On DNA cases, you have to have a sample. Sometimes they're not available. Sometimes they've been lost. Sometimes they've been thrown out. If they're available, usually no prior DNA testing has been done. Note, I said usually. And if it's not a DNA case, it has to have a lot of credibility. Remember, everybody says they're innocent. And there have been cases, by the way, where the DNA has proven that the guy did it. Anyway, they get it, they confirm the results. Then you go to the district attorney and you ask that they join in a motion for acquittal. Acquittal means the judge says they didn't do it. You can't just take it and go up to the warden and say, hey, here's our results. It shows the guy didn't do it. The warden says, oh, okay, let him out. No. This is a slow process. You petition the court, they review it. Now, if the deputy district attorney goes along with the program and says, yes, we'll join you in it, then you usually don't have any problem. Although, there are still instances. See, originally, the police and the deputy district attorneys, they didn't want it. You have a finality rule in the law. We're done. If you never let it finish, it just keeps going and going and going. Now you get a lot of cooperation. And here's the guys that handle it. These are the ones behind the scenes. These are, the bookworms and the lab rats and the paralegals, attorneys. They don't get the glory. These are not the ones that you will see walking out of the courtroom when a man's been exonerated and standing in front of the reporters. But they work hard. They get a lot of satisfaction in what they do. Can you imagine if you saw somebody fall off the ship and you jumped in and you could save them? You would feel pretty good that you saved a life. Over 250 people have been saved from prison, and many of them from death row by all of these people. Now, if it's not a DNA case, what are we looking for? We are not looking for technical flaws. We're not looking for that at all. We're looking for missed witnesses that either weren't found, or they weren't interviewed, or they were even suppressed. Prosecutorial misconduct, it does happen. The thing is, it's not supposed to, but you're going to hear a little bit that occasionally it does. Physical proof that the defendant could not have done it. And there's a case I'm going to tell you about that had just that. In other words, you're here at minute 1, the thing was done at minute 15, and it would have taken you 40 minutes to get there. You say to yourself, how could that happen? How could a case like that end up in a conviction? Now, sometimes it's bad luck and sometimes it's playing with things. What makes the bad verdict? Bad lawyering. And I don't mean incompetence totally. Prosecutorial misconduct, falsified evidence, eyewitness misidentification, unreliable jailhouse snitches. Let me explain these. Bad lawyering, it can be overloaded. Just don't have the time and the money to do it the way we want to. Prosecutorial misconduct, suppression of evidence. Evidence that could have proven the defendant was innocent. Falsified evidence. Everybody knows, almost everybody knows the name Mark Furman. Right. He was yelled at, hey, it got to be Mark Furman. He took all that stuff and he planted that bloody glove. Do I think he did? Who knows? Does it ever happen? Yes, it does. Eyewitness identification. People, let me tell you something. That should scare you. It really should. How many of you, just a momentary digression, how many of you saw the movie or remember the movie The Wrong Man, Alfred Hitchcock movie? 1, 2. 1953, a guy, Henry Fonda, played Christopher Emmanuel Ballesteros. Nice guy, easygoing guy. He was picked as a armed robber, most easygoing guy in the world. And he was going to be convicted. And the only thing that saved him was, in the middle of the trial, a juror jumped up and said, "Your Honor, this is so boring, do we have to do..." And the judge missed trial while he was waiting for another trial. While his wife had had a nervous breakdown and was in a mental institution, the real guy was caught. But there were 5 witnesses, eyewitnesses, that swore it was Manny Ballesteros that did it. Oh, hold that a minute. Jailhouse informants, they're worth their weight in toilet paper. This is the guy who says, "Hey, your defendant," to the district attorney, "your defendant, he was in the cell with me. He confessed that he did it. He told me about it. I will testify, but I'd like some extra desserts and I'd like a little more time in the exercise yard." You know, they got nothing to lose. The difference between not guilty and innocent. Not guilty means that the prosecution could not prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt. The guy could be guilty as anything you want, but if evidence was not taken properly, if evidence was lost, the jury will come in with not guilty. Factual innocence is saying that I did not do it. It is a finding by the court. He did not do it. He had nothing to do with it. That is what that is. Story time. You know where it's going to end, but you've got to follow this one. Ron Cotton, Jennifer Thompson, 1985, I believe it was. She was sexually assaulted in the middle of the night. She was in her early 20s. She kept her wits about her. She got the guy to turn on the lights. And she said, "I am not going to be the victim. He's not going to get away with it." She memorized everything she could about her attacker. The eyes, the hair, the complexion, the ears, the nose, facial hair, everything. She reported it. Now, Ron was not a perfect human being. He had had some run-ins with the police, and they had his picture. So they gave her a photo lineup. Pick out the guy. He was in it. Took her about 5 minutes, and finally, she picked Ron. Okay, then they gave a live lineup. Very good witness. It was them, the defendant, Ron Cotton. He's convicted. Life imprisonment. Life imprisonment. What happened next was the judge had made some mistakes during the trial, so he gets a new trial. Now there's a guy in prison with him named Bobby Poole. Bobby Poole is running around saying, "Hey, guess what? I'm the one that did that rape. Ron, he's serving my time." Well, Ron heard about this. So when the second trial came up, Bobby Poole was brought in. Sure enough, he was sitting there. Jennifer was up on the stand. What happens? See Bobby Poole? Recognize him? Who did it? Ron's back in prison. Ron is back in prison. Guess who did it? See, Ron was hearing about DNA through the OJ trial, and he got his DNA tested. Bobby did it. In fact, the DNA not only released Ron, but it proved that Bobby Poole did it. He spent 11 years in prison. Now, there's a little twist here. Let me tell you what happened. And that was, after Ron got released, Jennifer had been told what happened. When she was first told about the DNA, she said, "No way." Finally, she accepted it. Now, how do you think they felt? She was devastated. She was devastated because she had been so certain, and now this guy had done 11 years. Ron, after 5 years, he had a lot of anger up until that time, and he let go of it. Now, what happened was, after 2 years, Jennifer said she wanted to meet him. And so they met together in a church near where she used to live. Just the two of them, a lot of crying, a lot of talking. Several hours later, they came out. And during that, Ron had taken her hand and said, "I forgive you." And what happened after that is very, very unique. They became friends. They've gone their own ways. They have their own families. They talk on the phone together every so often. Jennifer, she goes out and travels the country talking about get reforms for the criminal law system, particularly with eyewitness identification. And here's an interesting one. Well, they wrote a book. And if you buy the book, part of it goes to the sale price goes to the Innocense Project. What happened was he goes with her every so often to do the talks. And on occasion, they'll be flying together and they'll be talking, and somebody will say to them that doesn't know anything, say, "Oh, how did you two meet?" And she says, "Ask him." Now, here's one. It predates the Innocense Project, but I want you to understand things that can happen. We've got a guy here, Linnell Jeter. Linnell had a job in Texas. Nice guy. Very, not the kind you'd think would be doing armed robberies of a Kentucky Fried Chicken. But there were some robberies going on there, and it was a black man with a satchel. So the police department put out a note in the newspapers, said, "Anything suspicious, let us know." And this one woman called in and she said, "I've seen a black guy with a satchel 3 times. He's parked his car here and he just goes into the park." Well, that was enough to get Detective Lieutenant Fortenberry to go out and grab Linnell. By the way, the car was parked 3.5 miles away from where the Kentucky Fried Chicken store was robbed. Well, Lieutenant Fortenberry figured it was him, and he called around and found out there had been a couple of other robberies of a similar nature in the next county. So he charged Linnell with all of them. Linnell had witnesses, but they weren't all investigated. He had the best reputation going. He had never had a problem before, never. But a lot of the witnesses weren't interviewed. Well, what happened was he was convicted, an all-white jury, which is probably irrelevant, but I threw it in. He was convicted, life imprisonment. Okay? Well, guess what? 60 Minutes got a hold of this. They spent 7 months working this out. Interviewing, re-interviewing, doing measurements and timing, checking phone record. Part of his defense, by the way, was paid for by co-workers. That's how much they believed in him. And they were saying he was there. And you're wondering, what is happening here? Well, the 60-minute show came on right after a Super Bowl game. That show received more mail than any other show to date. More mail than any show to date. 4 days after that show aired, you know what? The defense attorney went to the district attorney, Wade, and said, "Let's get him released." 4 days later, Linnell was released on $1,000 bail to determine if the district attorney was going to determine, are they going to try him again? They never did. Thank you. Innocence Project successes, these are out of date. They increase every day. You can see what that one is. The next one. Exonerations in 34 states. Important thing here, 17 of the people exonerated, 17 where it was proven that they did not do it. They were on death row. If it had not been for the Innocence Project, they would have been executed. Hi. Thank you. 40% of the DNA results have shown not just that the guy didn't do it, but it has identified who did it, because there are many, many databases for DNA. If you want to know more, you go to innocenceproject.org, or just go to Google, Innocence Project cases. They are fascinating, to say the least. After you get exonerated, what happens? You got no money, no job, decades of differences, and usually a lot of anger and distrust. You know, you had a family, you had a job, maybe a husband, wife, fiance, boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever it might be, a pet. After a lot of years, a lot of decades, you probably don't have that. Compensation? Yeah. Federal law gives you between $50,000 and $100,000 a year for wrongful conviction. $100,000 goes to death row inmates. States, some of them have it. It's an uphill battle and the amounts vary. And by the way, I'm trying to remember who it was, got 11,000. Oh, Ron got it. He got $10,000 for each year he was in, got $110,000 from the state for the wrongful conviction. Anyway, you know, there's a saying, he who thinks makes others think. And I'm thinking I got to learn more about computers. Anyway, it gives you something to think about. It really does. That's all I really want you to do, is to think. I want you also to, let me tell you one saying that I've heard. You can take of a person's money, but after all is said and done, you've only taken their money. But if you take of their time, you've taken a piece of their life. And that's here. And at this moment, I want to thank you for having given me a piece of your life. Now, I told you, everybody have a ticket. I've got a drawing for some prizes for having put up with me. That's it. I'm going to pull out my little goodie bag. And
I'll give you the thing.
My invaluable, I always wonder about the word invaluable. I think it should be valuable. Yeah, because in negates. Okay.
Can you see it? Can you see the numbers?
Can I see the number? Oh, yes. I put them in Braille. Okay, number. I'm going to give you the last four numbers. 5200. Right here. Come on up or down. I'm just going to reach in here. I hope you can use that. I love dogs. That's a retractable leash. My pleasure. Oh. All right, here we go. Next one, real quick here. I know I'm probably treading on the bingo time. Okay, let's try 5321. Who's 5321? All right, see, sorry you left. All right, here we go. 5321. 5037. We have a winner. And our winner gets a Mintech DVD player with a built-in screen.
Thank you.
There you go. Next, 5329. 5329. we have it coming up here? We have it coming up here. I was afraid to say 18B or everybody would start screaming. All right.
How you doing?
That is a fan to go under your laptop computer when it gets hot, or a friend's. Here we go. 5318. 5318. Oh. A camcorder. Digital camcorder works wonderful. Move it along, David. Okay, here we go. 5328. 5320. There she is. This lady gets portable DVD player with a remote. You can keep that. We're moving along. We're almost done here. 5326. 5326. Do we have a winner? We have one here coming up. We're getting down to the final prize here, final prizes. All right. Very beautiful belt buckle, Chinese dragon. 5326. Didn't I just say that? 5326? Okay. Oh, that was yours. Okay. 5330. 5440 or fight. The one after that, 5306. Here is a beautiful commemorative U.S. half dollar. 5306. Here's 5306 coming up. Keychain and laser pointer. And now, for the pièce de résistance, whatever that means. This is a bathrobe, princess bathrobe, not the kind you get in the, in your room. This is the kind you buy, $90 in the store. And the number is, oh, that's mine. Okay, no. 5320. 5320. Come on down here. Finally, I have for the first 47 people that might want them. Good. I have some mouse pads. Anybody that wants one? I'll put one down. I'll put them down here. They're magnetic. If you don't like them for your mouse, put them up on your refrigerator. And I have 17 DVDs that have both of the 60-minute shows on them. If you want one, come and get it. Thank you very much.